No one missed you at Dad's funeral, Mira, so don't pretend you care now, just pay the damn bill. My sister Lila's cursive, sharp as a blade, slashed across the bottom of the invoice, each word a deliberate wound. I, Mira Langston, 34, a postal worker who knew every mailbox in Black Mountain, North Carolina, stood rooted on the porch of my rented cottage, the October air biting with the scent of wet leaves and wood smoke from chimneys curling across the valley. The invoice demanded $8,472.63, my share of my father's funeral, a man whose death I'd been barred from mourning. The paper shook in my hands, not from the cold but from the betrayal, as if Lila had reached through the envelope to choke the breath from me. I hadn't seen my sister in 5 years, not since I fled to Asheville to escape her venom, her accusations that I'd stolen our father's love. Lila Harper Mason, 3 years my senior, was Black Mountain's darling, the woman who could silence a room at the harvest supper with a smile, her burgundy dresses and practiced laugh a fixture of our town's traditions. Our father's death. Last month was no shock. His lungs, scarred from decades at the textile mill, had betrayed him slowly, each cough a reminder of time running out. I'd called my mother daily, my voice breaking as I begged to come back, but Lila's words were a wall. Stay away, Mira. You'll break Mom's heart. I stayed away, believing it was for the best, swallowing my grief to keep the peace. Now, this invoice, with its cruel note, was a slap, telling me I'd been erased, as if I'd never been my father's daughter. I scanned the invoice again, my eyes snagging on the funeral home's letterhead, September 12th. My father died on September 15th. My pulse thrummed, a pattern emerging like the ones I spotted daily in my mailbag, forged signatures, misdirected packages, secrets hidden in plain sight. This wasn't a clerical error, it was a lie, deliberate and cold. As a postal worker, I knew Black Mountain's pulse, the love letters, the unpaid bills, the packages sent to nowhere. Lila's note was a calculated strike, but the wrong date. Was her slip, a thread I'd pull until her facade unraveled. Inside my cottage, the air was heavy with cedar and the faint bitterness of yesterday's coffee. The pine walls, warped from years of mountain winters, caught the morning light, casting shadows like the ghosts of my father's stories. My mother had called last night, her voice trembling, asking me to stop by before the harvest supper, the town's annual gathering where neighbors shared cornbread, cider, and pecan pie under string lights, swapping tales of family and loss. She'd mentioned my father's old music box, the one he'd wind up to play "You Are My Sunshine" when I was a child, its wooden surface etched with curling vines. Lila wanted to sell it, my mother had said, her words halting, but I kept it for you. I found it on my kitchen table, its melody faint but piercing as I turned the crank, each note a memory of my father's voice, low and warm, singing to me when I was sick, promising I'd always be his sunshine. I turned the music box over, my fingers tracing the vines, noticing a faint seam in the base, a hidden compartment that wouldn't yield without a tool. Why had Lila wanted it gone? Was it just her old jealousy, or something she feared I'd find? I was 6 when my father first played it, his hands rough from the mill, his smile a shield against the world. Lila, 9, had watched from the doorway, her lips tight, her eyes sharp. It's childish, she'd said, but her voice carried something darker, envy, maybe, or a grudge that never faded. I'd ignored her then, thinking we'd outgrow it. Now, her note, "No one missed you," was a continuation of that wound, a declaration that I didn't belong to the family I'd fought to hold on to. I called my mother again, the phone heavy in my hand. "Mira, honey, come by tomorrow," she said, her voice fragile. "The music box, it's yours. Lila's been angry about it." Her words faltered, as if she were guarding a secret. "Did she say why I wasn't allowed at the funeral?" I asked, my voice steady despite the ache. A long pause, then, "Lila said you'd make things harder. She handled everything." My grip tightened, my nails digging into my palm. Lila had painted me as the absent daughter, the troublemaker, while she played the grieving saint, manipulating my mother's grief to keep me away. But the invoice's date, 3 days before my father's death, was no accident. It was a crack in her story, and I'd spent years noticing cracks in the mail I carried, hesitant hands, hurried signatures, secrets tucked into envelopes. I walked to the post office, the morning air sharp against my cheeks, the streets of Black Mountain, lined with clapboard houses and maples shedding red and gold in a slow, mournful dance. The brick building was my second home, its hum of sorting machines a rhythm I knew by heart. I bypassed my delivery route, heading straight for the logs. Lila had sent 3 packages to 214 Oak Street, Asheville, in the weeks before my father's death, each labeled Daniel. The name was unfamiliar, but the timing was precise, deliberate. I cross-referenced the address, residential, not a business. Who was Daniel? A creditor? A lover? A secret my father kept? I recalled a fight years ago, Lila screaming at my father. In the kitchen, you always choose Mira. Her voice had cracked, not just with anger but with something deeper, fear, maybe, of being left behind. Back at my cottage, I spread the invoice beside the music box, its carved vines glinting like a challenge. The harvest supper was tomorrow, a tradition my father loved, where he'd roll dough for pecan pie, his apron dusted with flour, his laugh filling the kitchen as the music box played softly. I could still see him, telling stories of the mill. Under the supper's string lights, his voice weaving tales of Black Mountain's past. Lila had stolen that from me, his funeral, his memory, his love. But the invoice's wrong date was her mistake, and the packages to Daniel were a second clue, a whisper of a secret bigger than money. I tried a paperclip on the music box's seam, but it held fast, stubborn as my sister's lies. My mother's words echoed. Lila said it held something he shouldn't have kept. What was she so desperate to hide? The supper would light up the town square, tables groaning with cornbread, cider, and my father's pecan pie, the air thick with laughter and memory. Lila would be there, radiant in burgundy, her husband Greg at her side, the town's perfect couple. But I wasn't the girl who'd left Black Mountain 5 years ago, swallowing her hurt to keep the peace. I was the woman who saw patterns, who carried the town's truths in her mailbag. I'd go to the supper, not to confront Lila outright, but to watch, to listen, to find the crack in her mask. Her note was a taunt, a move in a game she thought she'd won. But the invoice's date and those packages were her errors, and I'd use them to unravel her. I stood, the music box in my hands, its melody a quiet rebellion against Lila's words. She thought she'd erased me, but I was still here, carrying secrets in every envelope. The supper would be my opening move, a chance to see her falter, to spot the lie in her smile. I'd find Daniel, open the music box, and tear down her carefully built facade. What would you do if your family erased you from a moment that mattered? My fingers ached from prying at the music box's stubborn seam, its carved vines mocking my efforts to uncover what my sister was hiding. The faint melody of "You Are My Sunshine" filled my cottage, a ghost of my father's voice, but the hidden compartment wouldn't yield. Lila's packages to Daniel in Asheville, logged in the post office records, were a lead I couldn't ignore, a secret she'd buried, one I'd unearth. I slipped the music box into my bag, grabbed my coat, and headed for my mother's cabin, determined to find answers before the harvest supper lit up Black Mountain Square tonight. The drive-through town was quiet, the streets lined with clapboard houses, their porches heavy with memory, maples dropping red and gold like forgotten promises. My mother's cabin sat at the edge of Black Mountain, its garden overgrown with my father's roses, their petals wilting in the crisp air. I found her in the kitchen, her hands trembling as she kneaded dough for pecan pie, a recipe my father had perfected for the supper. "You're early," she said, her voice soft but strained, her eyes avoiding mine. I set the music box on the counter, its weight a silent question. Why did Lila fight with Dad about this? I asked, keeping my tone even, though my pulse raced. My mother's hand stilled, flour dusting her fingers. "She thought it was junk," she said, too quickly. "Said we should sell it to cover costs." Her hesitation was a crack, one I'd learned to spot in years of delivering mail, people hiding truths behind hurried words. I leaned closer, my voice low. "Costs like what? The funeral she kept me from?" My mother flinched, her eyes darting to the music box. "Lila handled everything," she whispered. "She said it was for the best." I pressed further, my words sharp but controlled. "What about Daniel? Who is he?" Her face paled, her hands gripping the counter. "I don't know any Daniel," she said, but her voice broke, betraying her. I didn't push harder, she was caught in Lila's web, just as I'd been. Instead, I turned to the music box, tracing its vines, searching for a way in. My mother watched, her breath uneven. "Your dad loved that song," she said, almost to herself. "He'd play it for you, not her." The word stung, a reminder of Lila's old jealousy, her accusations that I'd stolen my father's love. Was that why she'd wanted the box gone? Or was it something inside, something tied to Daniel? I needed more than her unease, I needed proof. I drove to the old textile mill, a crumbling relic on the town's edge where my father had worked for decades. The air inside was thick with dust, the silence broken by creaking beams and the faint echo of machinery long gone. His office was untouched, a shrine to his years of labor, ledgers stacked on a desk, a faded photo of us on a Blue Ridge trail, the music box playing in my memory. I searched the drawers, finding a small key taped beneath one, its metal cold against my fingers. It fit a locked box under the desk, revealing a folded note in my father's handwriting, for Mira. "Keep it safe." Inside was a single name, Daniel, and an Asheville address, the same one from Lila's packages. My heart thudded. Who was Daniel? Why had my father hidden this? The note was a lifeline, a piece of him reaching out, but it raised more questions than answers. I pocketed it, my mind racing. Lila's packages weren't random, they were payments, or threats, to keep someone silent. But why? I drove back to town, the harvest supper's glow already lighting the square, string lights casting shadows over tables laden with cornbread, cider, and pecan pie. The air buzzed with laughter, but I felt the weight of eyes, neighbors who'd bought Lila's story that I'd abandoned my family. I slipped into the crowd, keeping the music box close, its melody a quiet anchor. Lila stood at the main table, radiant in burgundy, her husband Greg at her side, his smile practiced but tense. She was the town's queen, orchestrating the supper with ease, but I saw her glance flicker when Mrs. Carter, the church matriarch, raised a glass to my father's memory, to the man who brought us pie and stories. The crowd murmured agreement, but Lila's hand tightened on her glass, her smile a mask. I caught another whisper, this time from Ellen, a church friend, to a neighbor. Lila's been secretive lately, sending things to Asheville before her Dad passed. My pulse quickened. Ellen's words were a confirmation, a sign the town wasn't fully under Lila's spell. I approached my mother, who stood alone, clutching a plate of pie. Why didn't you tell me about Daniel? I asked, my voice low but firm. Her eyes widened, fear flashing across her face. Lila said it would hurt the family, she whispered. Your dad, he had regrets. Regrets. The word hit like a stone. Was Daniel a regret? A secret my father kept from me? My mother's fear was real, but it wasn't of me, it was of Lila, the daughter who'd twisted her grief into a leash. I touched her arm, my voice steady. I'll find the truth, Mom. For Dad. She nodded, tears welling, but said nothing. More. I stepped back, blending into the supper's crowd, my eyes on Lila. She laughed, but it was hollow, her gaze darting as if she sensed me watching. Greg caught my eye, his expression unreadable, a flicker of guilt or doubt. Did he know about Daniel? Was he part of Lila's game? The music box pressed against my side, its hidden compartment a promise of answers. I'd go to that Asheville address, find Daniel, and uncover what Lila feared. She'd tried to erase me, but I was here, piecing together her lies, one clue at a time. The note in my father's handwriting, for Mira. Keep it safe. Burned in my pocket as I left. The mill, the name Daniel, and the Asheville address a lifeline to a truth Lila was desperate to bury. The harvest supper's glow faded behind me, its laughter and clinking glasses a stark contrast to the weight of my mother's fear and Ellen's whispered hint about my sister's secretive packages. I drove through Black Mountain's quiet streets, the music box heavy in my bag, its melody a faint echo of my father's voice, urging me to dig deeper. Lila's control over the town, over my mother, was a carefully woven lie, but the note and those packages were threads I'd unravel, no matter the cost. I pulled into my cottage, the air thick with cedar and the faint tang of spilled coffee. The music box sat on my table, its carved vines glinting under the lamp, the stubborn seam in its base a challenge I hadn't cracked. I tried a small knife again, but it wouldn't give, as if guarding my father's secret. My mother's words. At the supper, her fear of Lila, her vague mention of my father's regrets, gnawed at me. She knew more than she'd said, caught in my sister's web, but I needed hard evidence, something to break Lila's hold. The note from the mill was a start, but it wasn't enough. I needed to see what Lila was hiding, and I needed it before she could spin another lie. I drove to my mother's cabin again, the night air sharp with the scent of pine and damp earth. Her porch light flickered, casting shadows on the overgrown roses my father had tended, their petals curling like memories. Inside, she was sorting old photos, her hands trembling as she lingered on one of my father, his smile warm, his eyes tired from the mill. You're back, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes darting to the music box in my hands. I set it down, its weight a silent accusation. What did Dad regret? I asked, my tone steady but sharp. Her fingers froze on the photo, her breath catching. He made mistakes, she said, avoiding my gaze. Lila said it would hurt us if they came out. I leaned closer, my voice low. Hurt who? Me? You? Or someone else, like Daniel? Her eyes widened, fear flashing across her face, but she shook her head. I don't know any Daniel, she said, too quickly, her voice cracking. I'd seen that lie before, in the hesitant hands of townsfolk signing for packages they didn't want traced. I pulled the note from my pocket, holding it up but not unfolding it. Dad left this for me, I said. It says Daniel, and an address in Asheville. The same place Lila sent packages. My mother's face crumpled, tears welling. But she said nothing, her silence louder than words. I didn't push, she was trapped, just as I'd been by Lila's lies. Instead, I turned to the photos, flipping through them for clues. One caught my eye, my father and Lila, years ago, outside the community center, her smile forced, his hand on her shoulder tense. Behind them, a man I didn't recognize, his face half hidden, but his eyes, hazel, like my father's, stood out. I pointed to him. "Who's this?" My mother's breath hitched, her hands shaking as she snatched the photo away. "Nobody," she said, but her panic was a beacon. I didn't need her to say it, Daniel wasn't just a name. He was a secret, tied to my father, to Lila's packages, to the music box. I left the cabin, my mind racing. The note's address, 214 Oak Street, Asheville, was my next move, but I needed to know what Lila knew. I drove to the community center, its windows dark, the remnants of the harvest supper cleared away. The center was Lila's domain, where she planned the supper, where she'd built her reputation as Black Mountain Saint. I used my postal key, access I'd earned from years of delivering their mail, to slip inside. The air was heavy with the scent of old wood and wax, the bulletin board still pinned with supper plans, Lila's elegant handwriting everywhere. I searched her desk, finding a locked drawer. My knife made quick work of it, revealing a journal, its pages filled with her meticulous notes. I flipped through, my heart pounding. One entry, dated 6 months ago, stopped me cold. Mira always got everything, Dad's love, his stories, that damn music box. He said it was our history, but what about me? I stayed, kept this family together while she ran off. Now he's dying, and he still talks about her. I won't let her have it. The box holds his secret, and I'll make sure it stays buried. My blood ran cold. Lila knew the music box held something tied to Daniel, something my father wanted me to have. Her jealousy wasn't just petty, it was a motive, a reason to erase me, to keep me from the truth. I pocketed the journal, my hand steady despite the rage simmering inside. Lila's words were a confession, but not enough to confront her. I needed Daniel, the man in the photo, the name in the note. I slipped out of the center, the night swallowing me as I headed home. Back at my cottage, I sat with the music box, its melody a quiet defiance. I tried the seam again, this time with a screwdriver, and felt a faint click, a false bottom, but still locked, requiring a key I didn't have. My father's note, "Keep it safe," felt like a plea, a trust one couldn't betray. Lila's journal was a weapon, but Daniel was the key, and I'd find him. The town slept, but I didn't. I pulled out a map, circling 214 Oak Street, Asheville. Tomorrow, I'd go there, face whoever Daniel was, and demand answers. Lila thought she'd won, painting me as the absent daughter, manipulating my mother's grief, controlling the town's trust. But her journal was her mistake, and the music box was mine to claim. I'd go to the supper's cleanup tomorrow, where Lila would be, her smile a mask for the crowd. I'd watch her, let her think I was broken, while I pieced together her lies. The community center, the journal, the photo, they were clues, and I was trained to find patterns. The journal's weight in my bag matched the dread in my chest as I parked outside the Asheville address, 214 Oak Street, a modest house with peeling paint and a sagging porch, far from Lila's polished Black Mountain world. My sister's words in her journal, "The box holds his secret, and I'll make sure it stays buried," burned in my mind, her jealousy a motive to hide something tied to Daniel, the name in my father's note. The music box, its melody a faint echo of his voice, sat on the passenger seat, its locked compartment a puzzle I hadn't solved. I'd come to find Daniel, to uncover what Lila feared, but the house looked empty, its windows dark, curtains drawn tight. I knocked, the sound swallowed by the quiet street, and waited. No answer. I circled the house, peering through a gap in the curtains. Inside, a cluttered living room, boxes stacked haphazardly, a single lamp glowing. A shadow moved, and I froze, my heart thudding. Someone was home. I knocked again, louder. And a man opened the door, his hazel eyes, my father's eyes, stopping me cold. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice wary, his face weathered but familiar, like the man in my mother's photo. I held up the note, my voice steady despite the shock. "I'm Mira. My father left this for me. It says Daniel." His jaw tightened, and he stepped back, not inviting me in. "You've got the wrong guy," he said, but his eyes betrayed him, darting to the music box in my hands. I didn't budge. "Lila sent packages here. Before my father died. I want to know why." He hesitated, then sighed, gesturing me inside. The house smelled of stale coffee and old books, the air heavy with secrets. "I'm Daniel," he admitted. His voice low. "Your dad, he helped me out sometimes. That's all." His words were too careful, like a letter sealed too tightly to hide its contents. I set the music box on his table, its carved vines catching the dim light. This was his. My mother said Lila wanted it gone. Why? Daniel's gaze flickered, his fingers twitching. "I don't know about any box," he said, but his voice cracked, and I saw it, the same fear my mother had shown when I'd mentioned his name. I leaned forward, my tone sharp but controlled. "Lila's hiding something. You're part of it." Tell me, or I keep digging. He looked away, his hands clenching. Your sister, she sent money, told me to stay quiet. Said it was for your family sake. Money. Not packages, cash, to silence him. But why? I was about to press further when my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, my old high school friend, now a bookkeeper in town, found something weird in the community centers. Books. Lila's name's all over it, but so is yours. Meet me at the diner. My pulse raced. Lila, using my name? I pocketed the phone, my eyes on Daniel. What did my father want me to know? I asked, holding up the note. He shook his head. But his gaze lingered on the music box, as if it held answers he couldn't speak. I left, promising to return, the music box heavier than ever. The diner in Black Mountain was a relic, its vinyl booths worn, the air thick with grease and coffee. Sarah waited in the back, her glasses perched low, a stack of papers spread before her. Lila's been sloppy, she said, sliding a ledger across the table. She logged donations for the harvest supper, but the numbers don't add up. And look, your name's on these receipts, for expenses you never approved. I scanned the pages, my stomach twisting. Lila had forged my signature, tacking on thousands and costs for flowers, catering, things my father would have hated. It wasn't just about money, she was framing me, making it look like I'd bled the community dry while she played the saint. I gripped the ledger, my mind racing. Lila's journal had shown her jealousy, her fear of the music box's secret. Now, Sarah's evidence pointed to something deeper. My sister wasn't just hiding Daniel, she was stealing, using my name to cover it. I thought of my mother, her fear of Lila's control, her vague hints about my father's regrets. Was Daniel tied to the money, or something more personal? Sarah leaned forward, her voice low. There's more. Lila's been meeting with Greg. At the old mill, late at night. I saw them last week, arguing. He looked scared. Greg, her husband, the man who'd stood by her at the supper, his smile tight. Was he her accomplice, or another pawn? I drove to the mill, the night swallowing the town's lights, the air heavy with damp earth and pine. The building loomed. Its broken windows like empty eyes, a relic of my father's life. I used my postal key to slip inside, the dust stinging my nose, the silence broken by creaking beams. In my father's old office, I found a locked filing cabinet, untouched since his death. My knife pried it open, revealing a stack of letters, unopened, addressed to my mother, from my father, dated years ago. One caught my eye, its envelope. Worn, marked, for Mira. Inside, a single line in his handwriting, Lila knows about Daniel. Forgive me. My breath caught. Forgive him for what? Was Daniel a debt, a mistake, or something that could shatter our family? I pocketed the letter, my hand steady despite the storm inside. Lila's forgery, Daniel's silence, my father's plea, they were pieces of a puzzle, and I was closing in. She'd used my name to steal, to manipulate the town's trust, to keep me in the dark. But the music box, still locked, was my weapon. And Daniel was the key. I'd confront him again, force the truth from him. Lila thought she'd erased me, but I was here, collecting her mistakes, building my case, the letter in my father's handwriting. Lila knows about Daniel. Forgive me. Felt like a blade as I sat in my cottage, the music boxes locked. Compartment mocking my efforts to open it. Lila's forged receipts, pinning thousands in fake expenses on me, and Daniel's guarded admission of her payoffs burned in my mind. My sister wasn't just hiding a secret, she was rewriting our family's truth, framing me to protect her lies. I needed to know who Daniel was, not just a name, but the key to my father's regret, and why Lila feared the music box enough to silence him. I turned the box over, its carved vines cold under my fingers, and headed for Asheville again, determined to break Daniel's silence. The drive to 214 Oak Street was quiet, the morning air heavy with mist, the Blue Ridge Mountains looming like silent witnesses. Daniel's house looked even shabbier in daylight, its porch creaking under my steps. I knocked, clutching the music box, its faint "You Are My Sunshine" melody a reminder of my father's voice. Daniel opened the door, his hazel eyes, too familiar, narrowing at the sight of me. You're back, he said, his voice flat, but his hands fidgeted, betraying his unease. I stepped forward, not waiting for an invitation. You lied to me, I said, my tone sharp but controlled. My father wrote your name. Lila paid you to stay quiet. Tell me who you are to him. He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the music box. Your dad. He was a friend, he said, but his voice wavered, like a letter sealed with trembling hands. I set the box on his table, its weight a challenge. A friend doesn't get secret payments from my sister, I said. Lila's forging my name, stealing from the town, and you're part of it. What's in this box that she's so afraid of? Daniel's face paled, and he sank into a chair, his hands running through his hair. Your father, he was my father, too, he said, the Words heavy, shattering the air. I'm his son. From before he met your mom. My breath caught, the room tilting. Daniel, my father's son. My brother. The photo in my mother's cabin, his hazel eyes, my father's regret, it all snapped into place. Lila knew, and she'd kept him hidden, paying him to stay out of Black Mountain, away from our family's name. Why didn't he tell me? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside. Daniel's eyes met mine, raw with pain. He wanted to. Lila wouldn't let him. Said it would ruin your mom, the town's respect. She sent money, told me to stay away, said you'd never accept me. I gripped the music box, my nails digging into its wood. Lila hadn't just erased me, she'd erased him, too, to protect her perfect image. I left Daniel's house, my mind racing, the music box heavier than ever. Back in Black Mountain, I drove to the church, its steeple cutting through the fog. The community center's books were stored there, and Sarah had promised to dig deeper. I found her in the basement, surrounded by ledgers, her glasses fogging as she pored over numbers. Lila's been clever, Sarah said, sliding a worn book toward me. She took out a loan in your mom's name, tied to the community center. Thousands, Mira, funneled through fake expenses. Your name's on the paperwork, too. I scanned the pages, my stomach twisting. A loan, hidden behind my mother's grief and my forged signature, to keep Daniel quiet and fund Lila's lies. I thought of my mother, her fear of Lila's control, her silence about Daniel. Did she know he was my father's son? I drove to her cabin, the roses outside wilting under the weight of secrets. She was in the kitchen, her hands kneading dough for the next harvest supper, a ritual my father loved. I set the music box down, its melody a quiet accusation. Did you know about Daniel? I asked, my voice low. Her hands froze, flour dusting the counter. Lila said it would break us, she whispered, tears welling. Your father, he loved you both, but Lila said the town would judge us, judge him. My chest tightened. My mother had chosen silence, protecting Lila's facade over my father's truth. I returned to my cottage, the ledger and letter beside the music box. Lila's loan was a desperate move, tying her theft to my mother and me, ensuring our silence by threatening our family's name. Daniel's existence was her greatest fear, not just a secret, but a claim to my father's love she couldn't control. I tried the music box's seam again, my screwdriver catching a faint click, but it held fast, its secret locked tight. Lila's lies were unraveling, but I needed more, proof to expose her, to free Daniel, to honor my father. I'd confront her soon, not with anger, but with the cold precision of someone who'd carried Black Mountain's truths for years. The music box sat on my kitchen table, its locked compartment a silent taunt, as Daniel's confession, my father's son, my brother, echoed in my head. Lila's loan, forged in my mother's name, and her payments to keep Daniel hidden were threads of a lie I was unraveling, piece by piece. My sister had built a facade of love and duty, but it was crumbling under the weight of her greed and fear. I needed to open the music box, to find what she was so desperate to hide, and I needed to confront Greg, her husband, who Sarah had seen arguing with her at the mill. His fear was a crack in Lila's armor, and I'd pry it open. I drove to the community center, where the harvest supper's cleanup was underway, the air thick with the scent of cider and pine. Lila was there, directing volunteers, her burgundy dress pristine, her smile a performance for the town. Greg stood beside her, his eyes darting, his hands stuffed in his pockets. I lingered near a table, stacking plates, watching him. His jaw was tight, his gaze flickering to Lila as she laughed with Mrs. Carter, the church matriarch. I caught his eye, holding it just long enough to see him flinch. He knew something, and I'd get it out of him. I slipped into the center's back office, where Lila kept her records, and found a stack of financial papers tucked in a drawer. My fingers traced the pages, more forged receipts, but one stood out, a transfer slip, signed by Lila, moving funds to an account labeled Community Reserve. The amount matched the loan Sarah had found, but the account number didn't belong to the center. It was personal, tied to Lila and Greg. My heart pounded. She wasn't just stealing, she was funneling money through Greg, making him complicit. I pocketed the slip, my mind racing. If Greg was scared, as Sarah had said, he was a weak link. I found him outside, hauling trash bags, his shoulders hunched. Greg, I said, my voice low, stepping close. We need to talk. He froze, his eyes darting to the center's door, where Lila's laughter echoed. Not here, he muttered, but I didn't move. Lila's using you, I said, holding up the transfer slip. This account, it's yours, isn't it? She's hiding money through you. His face paled, his hands trembling. You don't understand, he said, his voice barely a whisper. She said it was for the family, to protect your mom. I stepped closer, my tone cold. Protect her from what? Daniel? My father's son? Greg's eyes widened, and he staggered back, like I'd struck him. Lila told me he was a mistake, Greg said, his voice breaking. She said if the town knew, it'd ruin everything, your mom, her reputation, the supper. I didn't want this. His words were a confession, but not enough. I pressed harder, my voice steady. What's in the music box, Greg? Why's she so afraid of it? He looked away, his jaw clenched. She said it's proof, something your dad left that could destroy her. Proof. My father's regret, Daniel's existence, Lila's lies, it was all tied to that box. I left Greg standing there, his guilt a weight he couldn't shake. And drove home, the music box heavy in my bag.at my cottage. I sat with the box, its melody a faint reminder of my father's love. I tried a small key from my father's mill desk, one I'd found weeks ago, and felt a click. The compartment opened, revealing a tiny, rusted key taped inside, no bigger than a dime. My breath caught. It wasn't the secret itself, but a way to it. I remembered the old safe in the mill, locked since my father's death, its contents a mystery. I drove there, the night air sharp with cedar, the mill's broken windows glinting under the moon. My postal key got me inside, the dust thick, the silence heavy. The safe was in his office, its dial cold under my fingers. The small key fit a hidden lock on the side, and with a groan, the door swung open. Inside was a ledger, its pages yellowed, filled with my father's handwriting. It detailed payments, not to Daniel, but from Lila, to a lawyer in Asheville. Thousands, siphoned from the community center, labeled as legal fees, to silence Daniel's claim to our family. My stomach twisted. Lila hadn't just hidden him, she'd paid to erase him, to keep my father's love for me alone. The ledger was proof, but the music box's key hinted at more, something bigger Lila feared. I tucked the ledger away, my hand steady despite the rage inside. Lila thought she'd buried the truth, but I was digging it up, one piece at a time. The ledger from the mill safe, its pages heavy with Lila's payments to silence Daniel, sat beside the music box, its tiny key a promise of something more. My sister's lies, forged receipts, a loan in my mother's name, a brother hidden from me, were a web I was tearing apart, but the music box held the final thread. Greg's trembling confession, that the box contained proof to destroy Lila. Not at me. I needed to crack it open, to find what my father hid, and I needed Greg to break fully, to betray her completely. His fear was my leverage, and I'd use it to unravel her empire. I drove to Greg and Lila's house, a pristine colonial. On Black Mountain's edge, its white picket fence a mockery of the family she'd fractured. The air smelled of cut grass and honeysuckle, the town's quiet a stark contrast to the storm inside me. Greg answered the door, his face gaunt, his eyes bloodshot. Mira, he said, his voice low, glancing over his shoulder. She's not here. I stepped inside, the music box in my hands, its weight a silent demand. You said Lila's afraid of this, I said, setting it on their polished oak table. What's inside, Greg? What did my father leave that could ruin her? He sank into a chair, his hands shaking. I didn't want to lie, he said, his voice cracking. Lila made me. She said Daniel's existence would shame your mom. Destroy our place in this town. I believed her. I leaned forward, my tone cold, precise. You knew Daniel was my father's son. You helped her hide him. Greg's eyes met mine, raw with guilt. She said it was for love, her love for me, for your mom. But then I saw the money, the accounts. She used me to move it, to keep it from you. His words confirmed the ledger's truth, but I needed more. The music box, Greg. What's in it? He swallowed hard, his gaze locked on the box. Your dad, he hid a chip in there. A second will, one Lila didn't want found. My heart stopped. A second will. My father's final act, locked inside the music box, a secret Lila feared more than Daniel's existence. I turned the box over, its carved vines glinting under the chandelier's light. The tiny key from the mill safe hadn't opened the compartment fully, it was too small, meant for something else. I pried at the base with a letter opener from their table, feeling a faint give. A panel slid open, revealing a microchip, no. Bigger than a thumbnail, taped inside. My breath caught. This was it, the proof Greg feared, the weapon Lila couldn't control. I pocketed the chip, my hand steady despite the fire inside. You're done protecting her, I said, my voice a blade. Greg nodded, defeated, his loyalty to Lila shattered. I drove to Sarah's office, the chip burning in my pocket, the ledger and music box beside me. Her accounting firm was a small storefront in Black Mountain, its windows fogged with morning dew. Sarah was at her desk, surrounded by papers, her glasses perched low. You look like you found something big, she said, eyeing the music box. I slid the chip across her desk. This was in the box. Greg says it's a second will. Can you get it read? She nodded, plugging the chip into her laptop. The screen flickered, revealing a scanned document, my father's handwriting, unmistakable. Dated a month before his death. It named me executor of his estate, not Lila, with funds for my mother and Daniel, explicitly acknowledging him as his son. My chest tightened. My father had chosen me, trusted me, and Lila had buried it. Sarah printed the will, her eyes wide. "This changes everything," she said. "Lila's been lying to the town, to your mom, about your dad's wishes." I nodded, my mind racing. The will was a bomb, but I needed to know how deep Lila's deception ran. I drove to the mill again, the ledger's payments to an Asheville lawyer nagging at me. The lawyer's office was listed in the phone book, Margaret Callahan, a name I'd seen on community center donor lists. I called, posing as a client, and her secretary confirmed she'd handled discreet matters for Lila Harper Mason. Discreet. Like silencing a brother, erasing a will. I hung up, my resolve hardening. Lila's empire was built on my father's love, stolen and twisted to serve her back at my cottage. I laid out the will, the ledger, the chip. Lila had manipulated my mother's grief, Greg's loyalty, the town's trust, all to hide Daniel and keep my father's legacy for herself. The music box, its melody a faint echo of his voice, was my proof, his trust in me, his love for Daniel, his final act against her lies. I'd face her soon, not with tears, but with the cold precision of truth. The second will, its ink a testament to my father's trust in me, lay beside the music box, its melody a faint echo of his voice. Lila's empire, built on forged receipts, a hidden brother, and stolen funds, was cracking, and the microchip's truth, naming me executor and acknowledging Daniel, was my weapon. But I needed more to bring her down, to expose her before Black Mountain. Greg's guilt was a loose thread, and the town's women, led by Mrs. Carter, were stirring, their whispers of Lila's overreach growing louder. I'd take her lies to the community center, where the harvest supper's legacy would judge her. I met Greg at the diner, its neon sign buzzing, the air thick with coffee and grease. He slid into the booth, his hands clutching a small black drive, his eyes hollow. "I can't keep this anymore," he said, his voice low, sliding the drive across the table. "It's everything, bank records, emails, Lila's transfers to that lawyer. She used the community funds, Mira, to pay for her lies." I took the drive, my fingers steady, though my heart raced. This was the proof Sarah couldn't find, the final piece to tie Lila's theft to her silencing of Daniel. "Why now?" I asked, my tone cold. Greg looked away, his jaw tight. "I thought I was protecting her. But you're fighting for your dad." "I should have done that." I drove to Sarah's office, the drive burning in my pocket. Her laptop hummed as she plugged it in, her eyes widening at the files, transfers totaling tens of thousands. Emails to Margaret Callahan detailing payments to resolve family matters. One email, sent from Lila to Greg, chilled me. "If Mira finds out, the town will turn on us. Keep the money moving." Sarah leaned back, her glasses fogging. "This is enough to ruin her," she said. "The town deserves to know." I nodded, my mind sharp. Lila's lies weren't just about Daniel, they were a betrayal of Black Mountain's trust, the supper's spirit. The community center was packed for the town meeting, the air heavy with the scent of pecan pie in anticipation. Mrs. Carter stood at the front, her gray hair pulled tight, her voice commanding as she called for updates on the harvest supper funds. Lila sat in the first row, her smile polished, her hands folded like a saint. I stood in the back, the music box in my bag, the will and drive in my hands. Mrs. Carter's eyes met mine, a nod passing between us. She'd heard the whispers, seen the cracks in Lila's facade. "Mira has something to share," she said. Her voice cutting through the murmurs. I stepped forward, my heart steady, the room's eyes on me. "My sister," I said, my voice clear, "has been lying to you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. I held up the will, its pages trembling slightly. "My father left this, naming me executor, acknowledging his son Daniel, who Lila hid from me." I handed the drive to Mrs. Carter, who passed it to a council member with a laptop. The screen projected Lila's emails, her transfers, the numbers stark against the wall. She stole from the supper, from our town, to hide my brother and keep my father's love for herself. Lila's face drained of color, her hands gripping her chair. The women, Mrs. Carter, the church ladies, the supper volunteers, stood, their faces hard, their support a wall around me. Lila stood, her voice shaking but defiant. "This is a misunderstanding," she said, her eyes darting to Greg, who looked away, his silence a betrayal. The crowd murmured, their trust in her fracturing. Mrs. Carter stepped forward, her voice like steel. "We've trusted you, Lila, but these numbers don't lie. You used our faith, our funds, for your own gain." The room erupted, voices rising, demanding answers. I stood still, the music box's weight grounding me. Lila's lies had unraveled before the town, her empire crumbling under the truth my father left me. I'd won this battle, but the war wasn't over. The town meeting's uproar still echoed in my ears, Lila's pale face and the women's rising voices a testament to her unraveling. The microchips will, Greg's drive, and the community's awakening had stripped my sister bare, but the final blow waited in Asheville's courthouse. I held the music box, "It's You Are My Sunshine," a faint pulse of my father's love, and prepared to face the judge with Daniel by my side. Lila's empire was ashes, but I needed the law to seal her fate and honor my father's truth. I met Daniel at his rundown porch in Asheville, his hazel eyes, my father's eyes, steady with resolve. "I'm ready," he said, clutching a letter from our father, one he'd kept hidden, its ink faded but clear. "Mira and Daniel, my heart is yours." We drove to the courthouse, the Blue Ridge Mountains framing our path, the music box in my bag. Inside, the room was cold. Its wooden benches filled with black mountain faces, Mrs. Carter, Sarah, my mother, their presence a quiet strength. Lila sat across, her lawyer Margaret Callahan at her side, her face a mask of defiance. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, reviewed the evidence, the microchips will, Greg's drive, the mill ledger. I handed over the music box, its compartment open, revealing the chip slot. "This holds my father's second will," I said, my voice steady. "It names me executor, acknowledges Daniel as his son, and allocates funds for my mother and him, funds Lila stole." The judge nodded, her eyes scanning the chip-scanned document, projected for all to see. It was undeniable, my father's handwriting, his signature, dated a month before his death. Lila's lawyer objected, citing procedural errors, but the judge silenced her. "This will is valid," she said, her voice cutting through the room. "Miss Harper Mason, you've manipulated estate funds and community trust. You'll face restitution and charges." Lila's mask cracked, her eyes darting to me, then Daniel. I expected rage, but saw only defeat, a sister who'd lost everything to her own greed. The judge continued, "Mira Langston is appointed executor, as per the will. Funds will be restored to the community center and allocated to Daniel and your mother." My mother gasped, her hands trembling, while Daniel's shoulders relaxed, his place in our family sealed. The women from Black Mountain, Mrs. Carter, the church ladies, nodded, their support a silent vow. Lila stood, escorted out, her footsteps echoing like a fading melody. Back at my cottage, I sat with the music box, its tune softer now, a reminder of what I'd fought for. I'd lost a sister, but gained a brother and a town's respect. The journey had been a crucible, each piece, Lila's forged receipts, Daniel's hidden truth, the microchips will, forging me into someone who could face betrayal and still stand. The lesson wasn't about forgiveness or revenge, it was colder, truer. Family can wound you deepest, but their lies don't define you. You define yourself by what you rebuild from the ashes. I'd carried Black Mountain's letters, its secrets, and now its trust. To anyone betrayed by those closest, know this, your truth is your power. Dig for it, hold it, and don't let their shadows dim your light. If you've followed this story, join us for the next, subscribe to the channel and share in the strength we've found together.